Hello and welcome to my video, where I'll be analyzing the recently released South Korean movie, No Other Choice, from a critical perspective. To give a brief background on what the movie is about, the premise of the movie is actually adapted from an old 1997 American novel called The Axe, with surprisingly little change from the source material. The movie stars a now iconic Lee Byung-hun, who you may recognize as a frontman from Squid Games, where he now plays the role of the main character Mansu as he navigates the loss of his job as a papermaking veteran and thus his identity. To reclaim his honor, Mansu decides that there is quote unquote no other choice than to take out the other three rivals, each of which serves as foils to Mansu. The movie does an excellent job of touching on various different social issues, such as the realities of work culture, masculinity standards, and the pervasive individualism within modern South Korean society, which we will be exploring in this presentation. So the four major topics that we will be tackling here are one, modern Korean masculine identity, two, hypercompetition and Korean work culture, three, individualization of systemic Korean issues, and four, role of satire in social critique. Starting off with modern Korean masculine identity, it is important for us to establish the values that have led to the development of Korean notions of what masculinity it is. More specifically, we should take a look at traditional Confucian values and how they influence modern social attitudes within South Korea, particularly through the concept of one, which is Ipsin Yang Nyong, which states that it is a man's duty to establish himself socially and bring honor to his family name through visible achievement and status. This, alongside the concept of chamyeon or social face, makes it so that failure is not merely personal disappointment, but a public moral deficiency. Fortunately, these values have been taken to the extremes in modern South Korean society, as shown in the movie in a very effective scene where a therapist has to help Korean men of various backgrounds with instilling the idea that, quote unquote, my job is not my life. So, how does this relate back to our main character of Mansu? Well, it is very clearly shown that he views his papermaking work as an inseparable part of who he is, with Matsu directly iterating this belief when he states that, quote unquote, being fired is having your head chopped off with an axe. Fortunately for Mansu, his worst fears do come true as he does get laid off, leading to a whole series of inevitable consequences. The picturesque family that he started off the movie with, as shown in this image here, is slowly taken away from him as his childhood home gets foreclosed, his wife ends up forced into taking a job, his children's music lessons get cancelled, and most importantly of all, he ends up giving his dogs away to his parents, to the sadness of the children and the viewers as well. These issues all stem from the loss of his job, leading to Mansu's emasculation and low point in the story. Now, moving on to hypercompetition, I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that hypercompetition did not start with Mansu, and that it is simply an unfortunate byproduct of modern capitalist societies, which is further exaggerated by South Korea's own corporatist culture. You can look back at any of the jobs that you, the viewer, may have had in your lives, and you will find elements of hypercompetition within them, such as workplace envy, office politics, status comparison, or even colleague sabotage. If anything, it can be simply argued that what Mansu does with eliminating his competition is simply the logical extreme of a dog eat dog society where one person's success necessarily depends on another's downfall. This systemic issue is further explored at the end of the movie, as Mansu is rewarded for all of his efforts as the paper making company realizes that the rivals who scored higher in the interview than Mansu were all eliminated, thus leaving him as the next best candidate, giving the company, quote unquote, no other choice than to hire him. The way in which the phrase no other choice is explored differently in this movie is wonderful, and I think it is a testament to the director's own talent. I think another important topic that we can discuss is the idea of individualization and how South Koreans often internalize systemic issues as personal faults of their own making. This is due to the Confucian moral heritage that we touched on previously, that emphasizes moral individuality and personal accountability, with this acting as a foundation of Ipsing Yamgyong. As a result, South Korean society remains extremely individualistic, with little to no social support systems. In fact, only 50% of working South Koreans have access to employment insurance in case of layoff. If that was perhaps closer to 100%, we could have potentially seen Mansu taking a different approach to dealing with these issues. Sooner or later, however, South Korean society will have to wake up to these pressing issues, especially with the rise in AI. The movie ends with a haunting shot of Mansu as the sole remaining worker in the papermaking factory, as he simply supervises the AI operated machines to this photo that I attached here, leaving us to wonder whether or not job seekers will be left with quote unquote no other choice than to simply accept their redundancy. Last but certainly not least, I think it is very important to talk about the role of satire in critiquing social issues. Sometimes talking about social issues can be quite tough, which is why satire and art become such powerful vehicles for critique. This is done amazingly throughout the whole movie as we explore Mansu's attempt to rationalize his cruelty, with the standout scene definitely being when Mansu confronts the first rival and attempts to kill him, as shown in this image. Mansu's clumsiness leads to an absurd sequence of bungled violence, exaggerated physical mishaps, and almost cartoonish chaos, reminiscent of the slapstick humor of the Looney Tunes era, all the while juxtaposed with the song Red Pepper Dragonfly playing in the background, making for gripping action and amazingly funny comedy situations. By making the violence look ridiculous, the film exposes the fragility and irrationality underlying Mansu's hypercompetitive masculinity. All in all, this was an amazing movie that I would highly recommend to anyone in general, and especially to those who are fans of Korean pop culture. I hope this analysis helped give you some food for thought, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.